Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor, your podcast and source for all things Rhode Island FC. I'm your host, Matt Intrican, and we're recording on Wednesday, October 30th, just in time to get you ready for all of the spooky things about to take place tomorrow when this goes live, and also getting you ready for the spooky tactics that we're going to see this weekend in Rhode Island FC's first round of playoff soccer as they take on the Indy 11 this Sunday in their debut. Can the Rhode Warriors get it done, or will Indy have the answers to top this team from their 6-game unbeaten streak and end their playoff hopes right out the gate? To get you ready for this first ever must win, we're going to talk today with Jason, our co-host with the most, and special guest, John Morrissey. Jason, let's start with you. How is it going, my friend?
Doing great. We recorded on Monday, Wednesday this week. I've always been more of a Tuesday, Thursday kind of guy, like back to university because or school. You could maybe just forget about Monday, sleep in or something. Yeah, but hey, special times call for a special schedule.
Up is down, left is right. Chaos is upon us. And then the man of the hour, who needs no special introduction, but he's going to get one anyways. We've brought out the big guns once again for this special episode. John Morrissey, the one and only USL expert and analyst covering the league, along with his friends and co-hosts at the USL show. But on top of his co-host duties, he also provides analytical breakdowns on his USL Tactics Twitter feed, his Substack, and the in-depth articles that he writes for Backheeled. John, you are single-handedly at times helping reinforce that this is the biggest league in the world. We've got the USL scarf. You can't see it in tonight's because we're zoomed in on everything, but we got the USL show scarf there. Welcome back to the pod, and happy early Halloween.
Yeah, same to you. Happy to be back. I know we tried to do this a couple times during the season, but what better time to do it than the playoffs?
We actually joked when we couldn't get you back on for the Indy 11 recap. We said, hey, the odds are maybe we'll see each other in the playoffs. And here we are now, living and breathing elimination soccer as these two teams take to it this weekend. But before we get into the actual details of the playoffs ahead, we do need to go over the news for the week. And we have some final player of the week and team of the week honors to give out for the regular season.
Yeah, so we saw JJ Williams. He became the second player ever for RIFC to be honored with the team of the week after recording a hat trick against Miami FC, including an assist. In addition to the goal contributions, William also recorded 4 shots and completed 12 out of 17 passes. Great performance from him.
So he's our second ever player of the week. We've gotten many accolades when it came to the team of the week honors. Zach Haribo also getting the nod this week after the Haitian international recorded a pair of assists in Rhode Island's victory against Miami FC, completing 2 of 3 dribbles and recording 4 interceptions with 7 recoveries defensively. He definitely put in an unsung shift there. Quizera and Fuson also got in that reserve honors with their contributions on the game itself. And Haribo and Williams, it marks the 24th and 25th players to earn a USL award in week performance this season. You love to see it. It's good to see that out there. It's the final one as we move into playoffs now. But do you think we gave enough attention and love to USL from the USL to RFC players this year, John?
I mean, it's always a tough balance. Like, whoever is playing Miami tends to get a lot of love for obvious reasons. I would say that broadly, like someone like a Noah Fuson probably didn't get enough national attention. Like, given the fact that he won the assist title and no one talked about it until the very end, seems to be a little bit weird. So yeah, I think we could have gone a little bit further in rewarding RIFC with some praise.
Speaking of praise, it's interesting you say that because you yourself released your USL Tactics Team of the Year. And I don't know if you want to break it down or if you want us to go over it, but I noticed that there were no Rhode Island players nominated in your team, not even as alternates. So I don't think we can stand for this level of Frank Nadarce slander.
Yeah, I mean, Nadarce was one that I was definitely giving some consideration to. It's tough because he's mostly in that left-sided central defensive spot, and that tends to be pretty strong across the league. he was one of the big cuts, and then basically name a Detroit center back. And they have given me a lot of stick already in terms of not including enough Detroit players. So I'm getting the hate already on that front. And then you got to talk about Fuson as well. I don't think I named an alternate behind Nick Markanek for the second striker role. I don't know why I didn't do that, but he would be the pick there, let's say. So yeah, ex post facto, let's name him on the second team all USL tactics.
I mean, one of the things that marveled me all year was Coach Connor Smith's tenacity to play these players in different positions within the structure of the formations themselves. I'm pretty sure we saw Noah Fuson at one point as our left wing back. So maybe, I'm just saying, maybe there was an opportunity to kick the likes of Davila or Armstrong and just kind of slot Noah Fuson as the left wing back playmaker of the year there.
Yeah,
Speaking of
I should have gone
coaches,
for it.
Could you break down why Eric Quill was your choice for coach of the year? Was it as simple as, the amount of points that New Mexico got this year, or was there something a little more to it?
The points matter, obviously. Like if you're the manager of a team that is near the top of the table in the mix for the Players' Shield, that's going to be important. It's the context of you looked at New Mexico United in the preseason. My data model projected them 10th in the West. They had major injuries to both of their starting center backs very early in the season. Almost everybody that they brought in was like a League One player, an MLS Next Pro player, guys who had upside but hadn't really done it in the championship. So the fact that Quill was able to identify a system, have them winning so many close games and looking disciplined while they did it, it feels like he made the most out of the least. And that's not to be overly critical of New Mexico's squad because there's a lot to like there, but just the coaching job in general and the accomplishment of how he utilized the resources kind of feels like the thing that puts him over the top.
Do you think that there's a missed opportunity for, I don't see a lot of newcomer awards coming from the league. Maybe they're there and I just haven't seen them. This is still our first year ourselves. But, I think of, comparing the likes of Coach Kano in his debut season as a coach. I think of up and coming players who've never stepped foot in the championship before. Is there a model that you guys, watch or tag for those rookie sensational breakout performances? Because, like you said, no one's going to beat Nick Markanek for almost anything this year. But there are some strikers, there are some other players that have emerged this year that kind of deserve their own stories to a certain degree. How do you watch that? How do you forecast that?
I mean, it's an interesting thing because of the composition of who's voting for these awards and naming these things at the end of the season. It tends to be like one beat reporter per market and a small handful of national reporters. It's tough to get over the fact that whoever wins the Golden Boot is just going to be the MVP. It's kind of also hard to get over that defensively, where if there's a center back who scores 7 goals from a lot of corner kicks, they're going to have the leg up. Personally, my corrective is shouting into the void a lot about like a defensive midfielder who's doing the job when I get the ability to vote. So I'm voting for players who might not have the stat sheet. Like there may be the Mark Ibarra types, who's somebody who I voted last year when he was with Pittsburgh to be a part of the team of the year. I wish that the league had perhaps a midfielder of the year. I love the idea of a newcomer and something that's kind of independent of young player of the year, because those are distinct categories. Who doesn't like more awards at the end of the day? Like putting the shine on as many people as we can feels like a good idea.
I agree. We have to move on because we have an action-packed show, but I do want to bring up something else that you wrote recently. And Jason, I think you have a pretty strongly opinionated perspective on this, and that is the robust attendance data that you've had to collect, I guess, ever since that Soccer Stadium Digest website stopped doing the tracking, unless that was you behind the scenes and we didn't know that.
No.
So that went dark, and you've been kind of carrying this work on your back this year. But before we let you go, I want to, Jason, as a new perspective here, we get to join. What was your overall impression when you looked at this data from John the first time out?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this, I think this is a solid kind of middle of the pack performance from the fans. Part of that is limited by the capacity. And then if you take into consideration the location that they're playing in right now, Rhode Islanders historically don't want to drive more than about 15 minutes or so. So we've met plenty of fans who are like, I'll wait till next year when it's closer. But the only thing that kind of concerns me when I look at this is there are some teams kind of towards the bottom of the list that have large stadium capacities and low attendances, which brings up two concerns for me. I imagine the operating costs for such a large stadium that aren't being attended very well could kind of be a drain on the club's finances. And then also, if you look at optics wise, it doesn't look great to have like 1,000 people in a 20K stadium. Like any Miami game you see just looks like there's literally no one there.
John, any thoughts on that before I hit you with my question?
I mean, I completely agree. I've been talking to a lot of Birmingham-centric people, especially in terms of Protective Stadium, which fits 40, 50-some thousand. They artificially limit it to 20,000. But everything you hear from the people on the ground there is that having such a cavernous space and having so many empty seats just degrades from the fan experience. The Miami point is a salient one as well. They played a couple of games at Florida International University Soccer Stadium, which only fits a couple thousand people. And it looks very shabby comparatively on TV. But you've got to imagine that whatever fans are showing up for Miami are having a better time in a venue that is built for soccer. And just to kind of pivot, I think that's why what's happening with Rhode Island is so exciting. Like having the venue that is custom built to your specifications. And again, with the ops cost as well, that you're controlling, you're really dictating the dates, the revenues, all of that in a way that is very meaningful to the bottom line.
In your most recent article, you had mentioned that some of the deficit that the league is experiencing with the overall attendance numbers this year is that uneven, swing or exchange between losing the Loyal and Rio Grande Valley and gaining Rhode Island FC and North Carolina FC. Us being a new team, like Jason said, we're out in the boonies, so it's difficult to get there. And then North Carolina, not a team that's necessarily put a lot of effort into building their attendance spread. So we were kind of starting at a handicap for the year. But when I look at this data, one of the things that really strikes me, and I'm curious for your take, I look at the number 1 and 2 seeds for both sides, and let's even count Vegas as an outlier. But is it something that we always typically see when the best teams in the league start to experience a decline in their attendance? Like, I'm not sure why New Mexico, why Louisville, why those kinds of teams would suddenly see this depreciation in their support when they are having some of the best seasons of their life. What is that about the USL, and should the league be concerned about that?
I was fortunate enough when I put out the chart to get a response from, I think it was the VP of marketing for Lou City, basically saying that they just comped less tickets this year. Like they were giving out less freebies. And so that looks worse on attendance. But in terms of the share of people at Lynn Family Stadium that were paying money to be there, Lou City was up a little bit. And that's always the kind of issue you run into with reported attendance, where someone like Las Vegas is reporting a drop. If you compare what you're seeing this season to last season, they've got more people in the stadium. But when Jose Bautista bought the team, he decided, we're not going to fudge these numbers anymore. We're just going to be honest. So Las Vegas looks like they made a pretty big depreciation, but it's pretty flat actually. So I think there's always a little bit of caution looking at this. You do worry a little bit when it's something like Birmingham or El Paso, where they had a bad season on the field and then the number drops pretty significantly. I almost think that something like Sacramento or New Mexico, where they're around 10,000 and it's pivoting by a couple hundred, that feels more like random variation, where Sacramento had a bunch of Sunday night games for some reason this year. I imagine that doesn't help them out compared to Saturdays. Like there are just little factors that can build up over the course of the whole year.
I can say, if you've been following along in the Reddit or around the league, there is some drama unfolding between the Sacramento Republic supporters and the ownership right now. Part of it because of the frustration with the stands and the way the stadium has kind of been left in a state of, I wouldn't say disrepair, but maybe not the upgrades and promises. They still don't have their permanent site that's been promised to them for a while. But seeing some of the ownership group kind of start taking to Twitter to argue with the fans, not a good look. But we are not the USL show. That is John's other podcast. So, but I do want to focus on the best news of the day, which was USL to Boise. Is it official, John? Is Idaho landing its first professional sports team dedicated to the Potato State?
It looks like a yes. And the important thing with these announcements is always looking at the fine print a little bit. Boise bought a plot of land. They announced, I think, 4 people with like very good track records as their ownership group. There are occasions where, and I'm thinking about Roswell, Georgia in particular, where the league just says, we are exploring the possibility of developing a stadium site. We don't actually have owners yet. Like that almost feels fake. Whereas Boise, which was a market MLS Next Pro was going after, this has the people, has the facility, at least the plan for it. And looks like we're getting some potato on.
I cannot wait to think of the creative names that both the team could potentially come up with, as well as the supporters group. Boise, interestingly enough, is one of the most hottest ground areas for growth. A lot of people moved there after the pandemic as a cheaper place to live when work from home was the new and happening thing. So Boise is primed for a professional explosion when it comes to sports, and soccer being the catalyst, especially USL soccer. It's the next best thing.
I can't wait for the potato jersey. It's going to be iconic.
Better than the
right
corn
next
on
to
the
the corn cob jersey.
Right.
All right, so let's move on, and I just want to get through this last bit. Playoffs. Jason, you found some things about playoffs. We needed to talk about the structure and expectations, but then you saw the stuff with MLS. I thought we were going to talk about a completely different thing on this tangent, but air out your grievances, sir.
Yeah, because a lot of us here are new to the league, right? I just kind of wanted to mention that some of us maybe have some past familiarity with MLS. Hashtag not an MLS podcast. I kind of forgot that they were doing that best of 3 series, and they want to be a serious league. I don't understand it, but that is not what USL does. It is just standard knockout rounds, straightforward, simple stuff.
So I thought you were going to talk about the whole fact that they want to move to the European calendar at the end of the World Cup in 2026, which I still don't understand the logistics of how you move that. Either there is one very long season or there is one very short and truncated season. I just don't know how you do that.
I can't wait to see snow games in Toronto.
But because that's not what we're talking about. John, I would like to ask you this question, because when we first connected, we started talking about the playoff format, and you had said something that resonated back then. And that was that, there could be an advantage or a benefit to having a 2-leg system in the USL, because, you had mentioned back when we had first talked that some of these teams make the most opportunity in their revenue and operations comp in that extra play-in game when they get a home playoff berth. I'm kind of curious. We haven't talked in almost a year. Is that boost, is that fan visibility, is that presence of having elimination soccer in both teams' camps something that USL needs to continue to look at and monitor? You've been around this league. You've seen them tinker. Is this the best version of the product, or is there more work to be done?
I think when we talked, the Jägermeister Cup didn't exist yet. That feels like it's going to be kind of the replacement, where at some point USL Championship is going to get involved with that competition, which, for those who aren't familiar, was kind of an intra-League One cup, a group stage based, and then they had a knockout round thing that League One did, and it debuted this season. Seemed to go over well. The people I've talked to really enjoyed it. And you hear from within the league rumblings that they want to expand it. That gives you a little bit of the sensation of exciting games, knockout soccer, but it's in the middle of the year during the summer months when you're just likelier to get families to come out. It feels like the best of both worlds, because you also aren't taking away from the integrity of the playoffs. Like, not to denigrate the MLS model too much, but 2-legged playoff series is just silly. Like a best of 3, I don't know. Nobody wants that. And I think the USL is wise enough to understand, like, you're turning off soccer fans at a certain point if you're just going all out for the revenue opportunities in that way.
So if you were the commissioner of the league, if you were the president of operations, and you got to make one adjustment in the playoff structure for this year, even with the seeding already done and your pro Indy and pro Phoenix Rising dispositions, what would you make as the adjustment moving into this playoff format in just a few days?
Reseeding after each round. So say like there's a bunch of upsets, you're gonna make it even out so that it's kind of best team against worst team according to seeds.
Interesting. I don't hate that. I don't hate that, especially when we're middle of the pack, so we would still be facing the same problems. All right. Well, then let's get into this playoff preview. Before we do, I do have a somber, quick update, and that's just because I didn't know where else to plug this into the show. But one of Rhode Island FC's most important fans, contributors, and just content creators, Matt Kerwin and his family, were displaced from their home today. There was a gas explosion at their house. It completely destroyed their house. They lost their dog in the incident. The rest of the family is okay, but they've been left with nothing after this fire and this explosion. So we're just asking, normally we would talk about the shirts and funding the campaign and the server costs of our podcast. We don't care about any of that anymore. Right now, if there's any donation that you can have or be made, or even if it's just putting a spotlight on the Kerwins' really just devastating news, please help in any way you can. All of the links are available on all of our social medias at this point, or the Discord. If you know Matt Kerwin, just reach out, make sure he's okay. And if there's something else you can do beyond your time and your money, please just make sure you connect with the community. But now's the time to show not just, pundits or fans of the league from afar. It's time to show the state of Rhode Island, and it's time to show each other why we follow this beautiful game and what it means in these important moments. So please just give him all the love and support that he needs through this really difficult time. But with that being said, let's get into playoffs. Let's talk about this. John, the last time we talked, you had told us and the fans of this club that we needed to temper our expectations because the USL was a parity-driven league, and that it would be best not to fall into the trap that so many other expansion clubs have. We've completely sealed our fate, many records earned, a strong positioning. I want to ask you first, where are you at now, and what would you tell fans as the stakes climb to an all-time high?
It's an interesting little proposition right now because you watch Rhode Island these past couple weeks and you really think they could go the distance. I'm going to be the voice of caution yet again because the playoffs are a random event. Anything can happen. It takes one moment for a game to completely flip on its head. No one would have told you last year that Phoenix Rising was going to be the team that won the title. Nobody would have said that about Orange County in 2021. Whoever gets hot at the exact right moment is going to do the thing. Could be Rhode Island, but just be along for the ride no matter what, because it's going to be a blast.
I mean, Indy 11 are now themselves in their fourth playoff berth in 6 full seasons in the USL Championship. They've been in the playoffs in their inaugural season when they moved over from Nassau in 2018. They then got in 2019, and then again in 2023. This fourth time being here now in this moment. It's the second time they've made the playoffs consecutively, but they've never made it out of the quarterfinals, often having to get through the likes of Lou City or Charleston to advance farther. Since we started watching this league last year, Jason, I always considered Indy to be this powerhouse of a team. And now looking back, I didn't realize that they've had just as many peaks and valleys as a club, not getting into the playoffs almost as many times as they have gone in to the playoffs. Before we let John answer, curious from your side, has your perception of Indy changed as we've now spent a full year watching this team?
Maybe a little bit. I think, like you said, there's the peaks and valleys. They have those really high highs and then some low lows. I think overall, like they're still an important team in the league. I mean, they have a corn cob jersey.
And John, out of curiosity, going back to your own mission statement, you eventually went from an Indy 11 supporter to Phoenix Rising. Did you bandwagon this team and leave them when they couldn't make the playoffs anymore and go follow a hot Rising?
I mean, it was Indianapolis, born and raised, lived there until I was 18, was there from season 1 watching 11 games at the mic. And it was more just like the family moved up to Phoenix, so I've got a soft spot for them. But Indy are really my team when push comes to shove. That said, I think you really have hit the nail on the head that Indy brand themselves well. They get the good attendance. I would argue they maybe had one good season in the NASL. They've had one great season in the USL, and they still lost to Lou City in the playoffs that year. You thought Mark Lowry was going to come in and be the manager to do it. He just kind of left to be an assistant for Real Monarchs, I think, in Next Pro, which go on, King. And then this year, I didn't know what to make about Sean McCauley. Came in with a pretty good track record, but we've seen Indy sign a bunch of veterans and kind of flop on the field. Obviously, McCauley was able to get this team to the Open Cup semis. The summer felt like it was the best soccer Indy have played probably since 2016 or 2017. And then the ending was a yo-yo, up and down. Ended decent, but then they kind of blow it against Tampa Bay in the final week with that big 3-0 loss. I just don't know what to make of Indy in a lot of ways.
And I think that's going to be the difficult part as these two teams start to feel each other out and get ready for this game. I think back July 5th, the first meeting of these two clubs, it was an explosive 3-3, end of game, dying seconds, defying draw, where RIFC go down early, but thanks to some second half heroics from first Frank Nadarse and the legend himself, Isaac Anking, scoring in the 95th minute, they were able to salvage a point, and it really made that, and to me, that was one of the biggest games of the year. And then again, we saw them take on Indy 11 away on August 7th as they played for their second and final match of the regular season, with Rhode Island on the busiest week of their year after first starting away to Detroit, tying that game in a, come from behind, losing Isaac Anking in that game itself, and then having to travel midweek to Indy, kind of resting the team for Hartford in the first ever derby at home. The midweek matchup saw heavy rotation with Jackson Lee, Gabriel Alves, Colin Smith, Connor McGlynn, Joe Brito, and Mark Doyle all getting starts, players that haven't seen starting minutes since that game. Well, I mean, maybe Mark Doyle has, but again, from an injury depletion standpoint, some of these names aren't necessarily strangers to that first team lineup, but rotating this much when the team was starting to find its identity. We were in an 9-game unbeaten streak at that moment in time. It was kind of form over function. It didn't look well. And what's interesting here is that these are not the same teams that Indy is going to be seeing this weekend. Neither of these games saw minutes from Koke Vegas. Neither of them saw a full 90 from Noah, as he was a second, half sub. Harivo was only recently added to the squad. He wasn't the lock-on starter that he's become now. And JJ was still trying to figure out what his role on this team was. This is just not going to be the same team. I don't even know. Jason, can we use what we've seen in the past as a pressure test, as evidence of what we're going to see this weekend?
I don't think so, because like we mentioned, this isn't really the same Indy team either. When we look at their season as a whole, they've kind of front-loaded a lot of their results coming earlier on. They went on that 10-game unbeaten streak, including those Open Cup run. But since then, they've had kind of, some struggle, inconsistent, like we mentioned, they just lost 3-0 to Tampa to close out the season. Since we've last squared off, they've gone on a 4-4-4 record. I've been nice here and excluded their loss in the Open Cup. See, I counted it in the wins. I took it out in the losses. And in that time, they've scored 17 and led in 17. I love the symmetry. 4-4, 4, 17, and 17. In terms of RAFC, when we look at how we've done since we've last played them, we've gone on a 6-4-2 record, scoring 23 goals and only letting in 9.
So, John, is this the curse of the Open Cup and going too deep in it to not win the whole thing? I mean, Rhode Island FC has a better goal differential. I mean, they may not have as many wins, but for all intent and purpose, RIFC kind of came out of this matchup and the rest of this series for the rest of the games in the regular season, kind of the better team here. What's going on with Indy 11?
I mean, since that August game when these two teams played, Indy's got the sixth worst expected goal margin in the USL. They've been able to kind of catch up late with that 5-game unbeaten streak, but there's really been almost a crisis of identity. You've seen Sean McCauley go with a 4-4-2 sometimes. There's been kind of this 3-5-2 shape, crucially a little bit different than the look that made Indy so good when they were at their best. There've been a lot of signings and a lot of kind of ups and downs in the rotation. We're definitely going to see Brem Suamaro in the midfield for Indy. He signed very late in the year. Harvey White as well, who kind of plays right back or right center back, was a late addition. It just feels unsettled, even as we're heading into the playoffs. Like, you're not quite sure what Indy wants to be, even though that was ironically their strength for much of the summer.
Does that make them more dangerous, though? Because I think that we can predict within 95% accuracy. I think there's one player that's questionable, which we'll talk about here in a second, that gets the starting nod at Rhode Island FC. When I went and tried to do the projection, like you just said, I could not figure out the back line, let alone the formation. I could not figure out who Coach McCauley would pick on the back line or the midfield. It really only seemed like the forward attackers were kind of locked in. Is that an advantage for an unpredictable Indy 11 where we may know what Coach Kano is going to deploy on the day?
I think unpredictability is a strength when maybe you're someone like Lou City, who you're unpredictable because you have 3 good players at every position that can be tailored to a matchup. Indy's unpredictability feels more like, oh, half of these guys aren't really performing. Why don't we just throw something at the wall? And there's certainly talent there, but Indy doesn't weaponize it. Indy isn't quite cohesive in the way where it feels as dangerous, I would say.
And would you say then also with this loss, against a team where they didn't need the points because Rhode Island couldn't catch up, they were basically, even though mathematically, there's been some mathematical conversations this season when it comes to clinching and positioning, but would you say that this is not the right momentum for Indy to go into this home advantage playoff game?
I think McCauley clearly went with a team that was filled with guys who aren't going to be starting this game, like Lawrence Wooton, probably Ben Mines, Elliot Collier. They're players who aren't going to be starters for Indy. I think given how tight the conference looks right now and given your standing against Tampa Bay, going with the B team in the final game felt like a misstep in terms of trying to build momentum and keep up your performance levels. Indy just comes in, and granted also, I must admit that I'm like eternally pessimistic about this team. Like, there's something about Indy 11 that just feels like it's going to go wrong at the wrong time. But yeah, like there just isn't that sense of momentum, that sense of we know what we're doing that kind of defines Rhode Island.
I'm still not quite sure yet myself when I look at this team, having done all the notes. I do want to talk though about just the players to watch and expect. You yourself had just now mentioned a couple of late arrivals to the Indy 11 roster this season, but I want to talk a little bit more about the players that we can, at least we think, expect will be either game changers on the pitch or lock-on starters. Who are some of the players that you think RIFC fans need to pay very close attention to when they watch this game on Sunday?
I think Indy is going to drive through Aiden Quinn in the midfield quite a bit. He's somebody who's done it across the league for years now. Very talented, quick with his feet, can cross from distance. He does box-to-box things, but that really undersells the complete skill set that he brings to the table. I think he's good. If Indy wins this game, they're going to get a great performance from Aiden Quinn. At the back, I'd be watching Adrian Dispay. He's somebody who I'd expect to start this game, but I can't say that with 100% certainty. When Indy's been at their best, he's been able to be aggressive at the back. He sets the tone with his physicality. He's very dominant in the air. He's allowed to dribble the ball forward when India is in possession in a way that you almost never see from a central defender. That's when Indy's at their best, when they can get someone like a Dispay carrying forward and really pressing the numbers. So that'll be a signifier of which team is kind of controlling the tilt of the field. And then I think one more that you have to watch is Hunter Solt in goal for Indy 11. When Indy was good, they were winning close games and they were getting huge saves from the loanee from the Portland Timbers. When Indy's been down in the table a little bit, he's just not been up to snuff. If he's making the stops, doing what he needs to do, and distributing the ball well downfield, again, that'll be a good signifier for the 11.
Is it a pro that Rhode Island FC fans can look forward to, knowing that we got 3 past Salt in one of our conference exchanges this season? Is that a good indicator, or can you not take any of that into a game with this kind of magnitude built into it?
I think it matters. Goalkeeping is such a mental game a lot of the time. Knowing that you're playing a team that, when they played their best lineup, hung 3 on you and had a rampant second half to do so, that's something that gives you a little bit of doubt.
And then, Jason, what are the players, like you said, there's so many that weren't in these rotations against Indy 11. Who do we think are the players that are going to have an impact on this game on the Rhode Island side?
Yeah, so like we mentioned earlier, there was some heavy rotation throughout these games. Koke Vegas hasn't actually played against Indy 11 this season for RIFC. So I think that's going to be a big deal for RIFC. Lee is clearly a great goalkeeper, but he doesn't play the same style that Koke does and doesn't have that same experience under his belt. Koke brings another dimension to the team when he plays. He likes to push up between the center backs and kind of help recycle possession. He'll help them, kind of stop counters and transition. And he's incredibly comfortable playing with his feet and can ping a ball to the wings like no one else in this league can.
I think Koke is going to be an X factor on this game. And then, of course, you can't deny what Noah Fuson will contribute to this game. The golden playmaker himself, he's in the best form of the year, and he's just getting hotter and hotter in these last few games and run of form. I think the only thing that's cooled him off in any way, shape, or form was that red card that did not get overturned, which it was not a red card at the end of the day. So Noah Fuson is going to absolutely be someone that we need to watch. And then you've got a surprising choice here for the third RIFC player. I want to know more about this decision here.
So when we played Indy the first 2 times, Joe Brito was more of the starter. And, there's been some kind of mixed results for him starting. But since he's kind of transitioned to this super sub role or, 6-man, he's done wonders for us, come off the bench, scored goals, great light assists. He brings a lot of energy off the bench. So I think since he's kind of transitioned to that role, him and Noah kind of swapped in that regards. He's done really well for us.
John, do you think Joe Brito is the final 15-minute, does he have the magic in him to be the X factor for this team? I know you've been following him since his USL 1 time. Is Joe Brito the go-to off the bench for us?
No, I love that call in this matchup in particular. When Indy struggles to defend, it's often because their midfield is getting misaligned. When they were at their best, they were playing with a double pivot. More often now, it's just kind of Sumaro as that lone holding mid a lot of the time. Brito is the kind of player who, either with his passing, he's someone who knows how to take risks as a passer, but also with those runs. He's got a little bit more of a forward impetus than some of the other midfielders in this group. That's going to take advantage of the space that Indy is leaving between the lines in a way that can make a real difference.
So kind of looking at the head-to-head here, we know the players to watch, but I'm curious, is this a favorable lineup for the way Coach Kano wants to deploy and the strategy he's implemented for the year? Or does this favor Coach McCauley? Because I look at your away odds and I am blown away at the fact that you've got Rhode Island as kind of the dark horse here. You've got them second favorite in the Eastern Conference, at least in the quarterfinals. You picked them, you favored them heavily on the USL show yesterday. Yeah. Walk us through what's the better lineup and what's the better playoff odds going into this first round?
I mean, my model loves what Rhode Island is doing on one hand. It puts them kind of neck and neck with Charleston as the second best team in the Eastern Conference, just in terms of like pure strength of the squad. a lot to like in the defense, in love with Noah Fuson in particular. Indy gets dragged down a bit because of the lineup uncertainty. Just the way that my math works out is a little bit punitive when a team is moving players back and forth quite a bit in the lineup. It also is accounting for the fact that form is involved, and there's nary a team in the East that's in as good a form as Rhode Island right now. So I think all of that is coming together to make Rhode Island look like maybe the second or third favorite to do the job in the Eastern Conference right now.
Do we see a lot of teams when they get into the playoffs change their style? Especially, you're the home team, you've got the home field advantage. Do we see a change in tactics often from these teams, or is it a continuation of what got them into the playoffs that we see demonstrated? Like, could we see Indy 11 suddenly try to park the bus against a red hot Rhode Island FC?
We very, very rarely see teams try to do that, and when they do so, it almost always ends up being a mistake. In the context of the Open Cup, I did a piece earlier this year where I talked to Bob Lilly and Mark Briggs about like what's the approach to these one-off knockout games, and both of them were emphatic about the fact that you've got to stick to your style and play your game. If not, you're doing yourself a disservice. I think there's certainly an ability to like make one or two targeted changes to try to tailor your game to the team you're playing. But kind of ripping up the blueprint that got you there feels like it's being too clever by half.
Almost as if you're getting in your own way when what
Right.
got you there is what carried it. I love that. So let's talk about this game, this lineup, what we think the roster predictions might be. But I guess I want to ask before we jump into this, John, final take just on the overall tactics. If you had to pick, if this was as simple as a rock, paper, scissors lineup, who's got the tactic that outperforms the other when it comes to these, just on paper? Is it the way Rhode Island FC presses and tries to disrupt and get the ball back in the opponent's final third with that aggressive, anti-possession, playing off the ball as much as they play on it? Or is it something in Indy 11's game that's going, again, on paper? We don't know, otherwise we wouldn't watch soccer, right? But what would that look like to you?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head with the pressing point. This is a Rhode Island team that won the ball back in the final third the second most times of anybody in the league. Crucially, they have the defense to back that up. They've given up the third least fast break expected goals in the USL. And Indy is a team that wants to be able to break you down on the counterattack. Indy so often is willing to kind of sit back and try to hit Douglas Martinez or Malik Foster, kind of making a curling run into the channel. Rhode Island is very good with those three central defenders about not letting that happen. That feels like a key dynamic. And if Rhode Island is able to use that midfield of Harivo, Holstad, and Ibarra to combat Indian second ball situations and make sure that they're not really winning at least a majority of the knockdowns, it's going to be really hard for Indy to get on the board. So that feels like it's kind of the way I see this playing out. Indy's going to try to make it physical, and they're going to try to make it fast, and Rhode Island just has the tools to deny that.
All right, Jason, we did not agree completely on this formation pick, but as of right now, there's no listed injuries for Rhode Island FC. So if something has happened, it's since the game and leading into their travels. They're anticipating leaving tomorrow to get a full day in, prepared for that Sunday midday game. Not a lot of warm up you can do or any kind of pre-practice with a 1 p.m. game. But Jason, walk our listeners through this lineup. Do you still agree with it, or do you want to call out where you think we kind of aren't on the same page with this?
I'll go with this, and then we can talk it out here in a second. So we're looking at here a pretty much an unchanged lineup here with Koke Vegas and net, Grant Stoneman, Karifa Yao, and Morris Dugan playing in that like back three. You're going to have Frank Nodarse out on right wing back, Clay Holstead and Mark Ibarra as your DMs, Jose Quizera out on the left, with Zach Harivo kind of playing that pseudo 10 to a certain extent, with Noah Fuson and JJ Williams up top. And we're predicting a bench of Amos Shapiro-Thompson, Jack Panayiotou, Albert Dikwa, Stephen Turnbull, Joe Brito, Jackson Lee, and Kofi Chumesi.
I think that this lineup gets the job done, but I think you and I had some conversation about whether or not this would be Frank Nodarse getting the start over Steven Turnbull. Turnbull seems to be in decline with the coach. His minutes continuously getting suppressed, or he's pulled early despite very consistent performances. I'm not sure if it's a height factor, if it's a more critical emphasis on defense that Frank Nodarse brings, but we've started to suddenly see him in this last few run of games as the alternate or now getting the lock-on start. Again, Miami FC is a hard outlier to like count and not discredit, but do you think that we see Frank? Because if you don't put Frank Nodarse in, who are you displacing? And it's one of those things where every single one of these players deserves to be on the pitch, but there's only 11 spots. So what do you do?
I guess that's fair. It does seem like coach likes himself some tall center backs. Just play as many of them as he can. I guess I didn't even think too much about it and just assumed, Steven Turnbull would just play on the right wing back. We haven't gone a lot into it, but it has seemed like for a while he's consistently pulled him somewhere between like the 63rd and 65th minute for some reason. So I haven't asked him about it. I don't know what's the thought process behind that, but maybe, like you said, maybe it's physicality and height.
I also think that Frank Nodarse did score 2 of his 6 goals against Indy 11 this season. So, and we've seen Frank punish repeatedly people that discount or discredit what he can do in the air. So I just don't see him not getting the starting nod. But that being said, Turnbull on the bench, a great weapon to deploy, whether we need to get dangerous and flip the script because what we started didn't work, or the fact that Chico on the bench, the Golden Boot winner from 2022, going into the playoffs, is that a pro, John? Is that something where you get to say we've got a lethal striker ready to change the pace of the game? Or is that something where, like, what are we doing here and why is Chico not on the starting lineup?
Real quick, I just want to talk about the Nodarse thing. I think he's actually a very good call given what Indy has with Aiden Stanley at that left wing back spot. Stanley's someone who got like 7 or 8 assists right out of the gates early in the season. Going for a more defensive option out from the starting lineup and then bringing on Turnbull to punish him on tired legs later on feels like a very solid strategy. And I think you can kind of make the same argument with Albert Dikwa, right? Like, it's awesome that you can bring on the reigning Golden Boot winner as a substitute. Nobody else in the league has that ability. The fact that Williams and Fuson have formed such a partnership up top means that they're going to be giving Indy all they can handle for however long it takes. And then to bring on someone like Dikwa, who I don't think gets enough love for his movement off the ball, really everything he does beyond scoring. Like, it's easy to look at what he did in Pittsburgh, where the job was be in the box and be a scorer, and underrate the complete game he's brought for Rhode Island. Everything you said, he'll be a menace off the bench when he does come in.
Jason, do you think that that's the right final piece? Or do you think that we're going to have to rely on the Joe Brito, the Jack Panayotu factors? Is there anything else that we need to call out before we move on to Indy?
I think it depends how the game pans out. I think we will most likely see Panayotu and then potentially Brito as well. Definitely, and I'm just assuming Chico's going to get some minutes too.
Amos Shapiro-Thompson, first goal in the playoffs. I'm calling it. Calling it now. And in 3 minutes of substitution time. Moving into the Indy 11 side, John, I'm going to have to rely on you heavily here because this was probably the hardest prediction to do on the year. First, I couldn't even figure out, like you had said a little earlier, if they were going to be a 3-4-3 or a 4-4-2. Coach McCauley seems to be in love with, it when in doubt, switch it out. But I think that this is maybe 80%. I feel, like I said, I feel really good about the front and the goalkeeper, but help us out here in the back in the midfield. So we've got Hunter Solt, who's going to be in goal for Indy 11. And then in a 3-4-3 estimation, which is what we have on the screen, I've got Josh O'Brien. Maybe that's Diz P instead. I've got Benjamin Ofemu in that center back role and Aiden Stanley only because of his incredible contributions. And it seems like he can float between left center back, left wing back on the season to help with those assists that he made earlier in the year. And then I've got Logan Needlinger, Brem Samaru, Aiden Quinn and Jack Blake, only because if you need a PK, you're going to need Blake on the pitch for the night. And then that front three seems to be just about the only thing I can say with certainty in Douglas Martinez, Malik Foster, and Augie Williams. How close is this? What needs to be retooled or tweaked here in this prediction?
So Stanley is the one thing where he'll definitely be the left wing back for Indy. He's been holding down that spot almost all year long. The issue becomes, and then Dispay will fill in the back line, at least I would expect. The issue becomes, like, if you're displacing Jack Blake or Aiden Quinn, that feels like an insanely bad decision for Indy to not have one of their two most creative players in the game. That's sort of why they've gone with the 4-4-2 quite a bit, is you can put Blake as this narrow left winger. You can still have Quinn in the pivot, and then you got Malik Foster on the right. Maybe that's the look. If not, I guess it'll be Dispay in defense, Stanley on the left, and you're just dropping Jack Blake. But kind of no easy answers for Indy, just given the composition of this team.
And, one of the things Indy did do very well against us to score their 3 goals is 2 of them came from substitutes. The first home leg that we had from Lawrence Houghton and Elliot Collier. Who do we think is going to be the impact sub from Indy 11? I think back to Guenzati, and it's like, where are the goals? Where's the performance going to come from if this game stretches out for Indy?
No, I think Guenzati is a great shout. Somebody who was kind of nursing an injury for most of that home stretch of the season. But when Indy was at their best, it was almost this like 3-4-1-2 shape, with Guenzati as this odd floating one between the lines. Very good about contesting headers on long balls, but he could make those late runs into the box and at least distract the defense, if not score on the end of the cutbacks. He probably won't start, just given the fitness and given the fact that Macaulay likes that front three that he's got going. But he could come into this game and be a real impact player for Indy.
Well, we will see what happens on the game itself. John, want to start with you now. We're into the business end of what we think both prospective teams are going to need, not to take points, but to kill, confirm, and secure the win in this round of quarterfinal play. John, we'll start with you. What does Indy 11 need to do to get right to get this W?
They need to be balanced defensively. You can't leave Samaro isolated as the holding midfielder. You can't let both your wing backs and your wider center backs push up field at the same time, or Rhode Island is just going to hurt you, especially on Indy's right side, which would be the Rhode Island left, where you've got Quizera going against Neidlinger. Neidlinger, somebody who graduated from high school back in the spring, just signed a pro deal out of the USL Academy system. A player I really like, but a player who can get taken to task at times, and he's struggled down the stretch. This will be the biggest test he has all season. If Indy's over-aggressive in general, he's going to be somebody that suffers. So making sure that you're supported at the back has to be the thing for Indy 11.
Jason, we'll start with you on the counter side. What do the boys in amber and blue need to do to get this done away?
I don't think RIFC need to do anything too crazy here. Forget those first 2 matches. Those don't mean anything. Those are not the same teams on both ends. That never say die attitude has been really important about this team. Coach talked about how important those draws were to him, and that ability to be stubborn and kind of fight back and keep themselves in games and kind of never give up. But also, this is our first year and this team's already exceeded expectations. So I think to a certain extent, they need to kind of just perform without pressure, right? They've already gotten to where most teams don't get. Like John had said, when teams forsake their tactics that they have gotten them where they need to be, they don't need to do anything special here. Just go out and continue playing the way that they played that's got them success.
I'm getting some Ted Lasso chills. Like, you're basically saying, just go out and enjoy yourselves. You're playing 90 minutes for fun.
Believe.
I do love that. That's a very nuanced answer from usually you being the analytics guy. I will chime in and say, I think this momentum that's been built is at what I would consider critical mass now. It's been so important for them to wash away some of the negative performances at the beginning of September, where we thought this team was spiraling, and now coming out the other side of 6 games unbeaten, especially with the mollywop that they put on Miami, regardless of the talent that they played against, that is a confidence booster, kind of making them feel invincible to a certain extent, but they have to respect that feeling at the same time. I look at this team as one of two things. Rhode Island FC is incredible at getting the job done in the final 15 minutes of either half. They're a late blossoming team to a certain extent. They have a lot of tertiary records now in this league for scoring in moments that matter. But where Rhode Island FC shines even more brightly is when they score first. And that is something where, again, they've been on a 10-game unbeaten streak when they've led into the first half, which would require them to score first. I think about this team, and I was reading on USLchampionship.com, 53 goals scored inside the penalty area during the regular season, second only to Lou City at 65. It accounted for 95% of the club's goals in the campaign. This is a team that, they're in the top 3 of scoring goals in the final 15 minutes. And we saw this calibration happen over this last string of games. It wasn't just the summer run. It was a continued plan. You saw a coach kind of drilling and instilling in these players this purpose. I think if they can get the job done and they can score first, I don't think they'll keep a clean sheet, but I think that they can keep Indy 11 at bay and come out of this with a win. My only concern not being the never say die attitude, but we saw what they did in the Open Cup. They clawed back from that one with 116th minute rocket from Steven Turnbull. Like, this team knows when stakes are on the line to try and never give up, never say die, but it can't come down to draws. I have no confidence that this team is going to secure their advancement if it comes to a penalty shootout. And when you've got the likes of Jack Blake, who I think he's the reigning penalty shot converter right now in the league, it scares me. So if this team can win, or if this team can score first and stay up, I think they're in a great position. But Indy 11 is not going to make that easy. And that could mean that the first goal doesn't happen until the 85th minute. If it does, hold on for dear life. And if it happens in the first 15 minutes, also hold on for dear life. So it's going to be an exciting game either way. John, I looked at the FOT Mob predictions. We love pulling a segment where we do score predictions. 61% think that Rhode Island FC will carry the day. You said on your USL show that Rhode Island FC dominated your own statistics collection and opinion on whether they would win against Indy. What are your score? You can either give a score prediction or kind of like what you expect this game to unfold and how this table shakes out.
I don't know if I said on the USL show, I think that if Rhode Island gets through this game, whoever wins their matchup against Lou City, that's the team that wins the title this year. Like, I'm pretty confident one of those two teams is going to do the job. And to get there, Rhode Island's got to beat Indy 11. So I've got them winning 2-0.
Wow. Are you okay saying that? Like, does your family have to disown you by saying that?
Well, I'm doing some radio tomorrow in Indy, but that will be recorded before this comes out, so I'm safe for now.
Yeah, this won't come out till 8:00 tomorrow. You have time to find a panic room and go dark. Jason, what do you have for your prediction?
I'm going with a 2-1 win for RIFC. Playoff soccer, it should be a close game, but I think in the end, RIFC is going to get it done.
I have 3-1, but I believe firmly that it will be 1-1 until the 83rd minute, and then things are going to get crazy.
One of those kind of games.
Maybe it'll go into the first round. Is there extra time? Oh, I should know this as someone who's talking. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it could go to extra time, and then we see it squeaked away by the substitutes, by a Joe Brito and Amos Shapiro-Thompson off a Jack Panayiotou secondary assist. Either way, it's going to be exciting. We've got 1 p.m. soccer coming up. That's, partying in the daytime for those that want to do it. It's a shame that it's on a Sunday. I I'd love to see the league. I know that we are not tenants in all of our facilities, or at least primary tenants. I'd love to be able to see us have like same time, like deploy, or like in 2 windows on the same day. It's not negotiable, but Indy had a hard time locking this game down. So, it is what it is, but we'll have to see what happens in the future. Jason, why don't you let listeners know how this game is going to start up and where they can expect to see this if they want to watch it?
Yeah, so the first round of playoffs kicks off on Sunday, November 3rd, as RIFC takes on Indy 11 away at Michael A. Carroll Stadium in Indianapolis. Kickoff time was confirmed earlier today to be 1 p.m., so midday party time.
Hey, I don't have to work for the club on that day, so I am absolutely going to enjoy some time, and I'll be enjoying it at the German American Culture Society of Rhode Island in Pawtucket at their Rathskeller downstairs basement partying area, where the local lads support a really big range of soccer. So if Rhode Island FC isn't your only jam, they've got obviously the German market, but they all will also watch Premier League games from time to time. So if you're looking for a place outside of just USL, the biggest league in the world, I should remind everyone, absolutely make sure you go down there. But come join us 1 p.m. this Sunday. And then if you want to go to the club's official watch party, they'll be at the Thirsty Beaver in Smithfield. That's a long trek. I wouldn't go that far out. I've already had to do that for Smithfield for the home games. I wouldn't do it for the away, but I'll still say it for those of you that are nearby. And to kind of conclude here, I want to make sure John gets his 30 seconds of fame, because I don't know how, John, we joked the first time we met you. I still don't know how you do all of this. Like, you don't sleep at all, or you secretly are like very rich and you just pretend like this is like a poor man's like lament, and it's a passion project for you. But I want to make sure that you get all the kudos and props. And I also want to thank you personally for all of your amazing contributions you've done for the league, for the community, for us, helping us along the way. I can't thank you enough. And thank you for welcoming us into the podcast network, the family. It's been so great, and you've made it so easy to be a fan and a supporter of this league. So from the bottom of our hearts, I can't thank you enough. But with that being said, please, this is your soapbox. You can say anything you want at this point, as long as you keep it PG, and make sure you let fans know all the incredible stuff you're up to as well.
No, I mean, I really appreciate it from you guys. You've done an unbelievable job covering this team in the first year. It's a difficult challenge to kind of figure out how you want to go about it and ride the ups and downs of the season. And you guys have been top class, like one of the best shows out there. So I hope you feel good about what you've accomplished growing this team. And I think that's the goal for all of us, right? Like, trying to get as many people interested in your team and the sport as possible. And hey, if you want to learn more about the sport of soccer, the USL, check out what I'm doing. I mean, I tweet everything at USL Tactics. I'm probably supposed to be plugging Blue Sky at this point. I don't know what the politics are saying. And yeah, please subscribe to Backheeled. I think it's unmatched independent coverage of American soccer, and kind of the gem of what I do is my weekly power rankings breakdown piece about the USL Championship there. And then one final thing, the USL show, live every Tuesday in your podcast player. It's dumb, it's fun, but yeah, we feel like we do a good job.
You do a fantastic job. Honestly, you've been the well that we've gone to on numerous occasions. And honestly, you've taught us more about not just USL Championship, but the League One and now the Super League. It's been fun being able to stay connected in that way. I hope, by the way, that you end up with Kaylor and the rest of the crew. I hope you guys get to do another one of kind of your pregame, postgame shows. And I hope we get to have you here at Tidewater this upcoming season. I know Kaylor said he'll never get on a plane ever again, but I hope that he kind of thinks about that, and we can see you guys up here. We'd love to host you and take care of you guys, because you're all such great people, and thank you for everything you do.
Yeah, well, I will say we've had loose talks with one team who would be interested if they make a playoff run. Not really Rhode Island, but if you work for Rhode Island, reach out to @the USL show.
Don't worry, the club listens to monitor all communications that go on in this show, so we'll make sure you get in contact with them.
And hey, I had to go out to California for that last one. If I can just move up from New York to Smithfield, I am here for that.
Oh, are you going to change your loyalty yet again? Are we going to go from Indy to Phoenix to Brooklyn FC now?
Trifecta.
I'll
of
tell you
teams.
what, you guys, the club sent me the kit in the preseason, and I wear that thing so much just around town. Like I'm one-man advertising in New York City.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, again, thanks so much, John, for joining us. Jason, get us out of here, and we can't wait to see what happens this weekend in playoff soccer.
All right, guys, make sure to check out our friends over at the Blazing Musket for all of your New England soccer coverage, including RIFC, and that is at theblazingmusket.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Threads, and TikTok at RIFC Podcast, Instagram at Raising Anchor, and we got that website, raisinganchorpodcast.com.
Anchor's up, buddy.
Anchor's
Can't wait to see this thrashing of the corn cobbers themselves a little later.